are units in which a prisoner is held in their cell anywhere between 22 to 24 hours per day. They're held in a little concrete bathroom. Their only interaction tends to be with guards. They get an hour of exercise 5 days a week, and exercise is had in what's oftentimes known as a dog cage. They go outside into a caged area that's about the size of their cell, a little bit bigger. They have no recreational materials. Their mail is extremely circumscribed and scrutinized. Their ability to have visits is severely restricted. They cannot have contact visits. And these units are breeding grounds for abuse. They are based upon this dehumanizing notion that some people are so incorrigible or essentially throwaway people that they cannot be trusted to make decisions for themselves. And the prison staff tend to take this logic to heart. And during the 5 years I've been working with the Human Rights Coalition, we've documented well over 1,000 reports of human rights violations in Pennsylvania solitary confinement units. In the 26 state prisons in Pennsylvania, including the 2 women's prisons, each one of them has a solitary confinement unit or a series of units. There's approximately 2,500 people that are being held in these units. Some are for infractions, violations of prison rules. Maybe they got into a fight, or maybe they, had some sort of contraband. I know one man who was accused of having contraband after returning from a visit. The contraband was the rosary beads around his neck, and he got written up for that. He given 90 days in the hole because when he went out to the visit, the guard did not note that he was wearing these, so it was presumed that this was given to him on the visit. So just as people are being sent into prison, not for violent reasons, right, for non-violent crimes, people are being sent to these solitary units, which are known as the prisons within the prisons, for trivial offenses. And they build these beds as part of these solitary cells as just the end line of this punitive logic, which is based around a very simplistic and false equation that by granting the government more power to perpetrate acts of violence is the way to safety. So in Pennsylvania we have, and just to kind of give a very broad and maybe overly simplistic way of articulating how solitary confinement fits into the prison system fits into the overall U.S. political and social system, I found the following to be a very useful way of summarizing it. And one is that solitary confinement units are used to terrorize the prisoner population, to keep them in line. The prisoner population is used to terrorize communities of color in particular and poor communities more generally. The socioeconomic conditions in those communities are used to keep the middle classes in line so that they don't fall into those more vulnerable positions within the socioeconomic hierarchy. And these middle classes carry out the agenda of the people who own the society, their political agenda, their economic agenda, their social agenda. And this is the basic power structure in the United States. This is how people are kept in line and how they know their place, and it is a structure of fear and violence and domination. And we focus on solitary confinement as an abolitionist organization for a number of reasons. One is that those people who are being micromanaged in this way are experiencing the worst of this system down to the most minute tasks in their existence. And some people are not just being sent there for, say, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days at a time. There are people in these units for years and for decades. I don't know if some of you saw Teresa Schultz on this video from the Human Rights Coalition. She was one of the speakers. Her father has been in solitary confinement units in Pennsylvania prisons for 30 consecutive years. He has been out for only 18 months during that time, and that was when he was sent to the federal prison. He has not had an infraction in about 20 years. I was visiting him with him a few weeks ago. He said actually once he covered the cell light because the cell light is on 24 hours. So I think he got a write-up for that. Other than that, 30 straight years. He has 2 escapes on his record, and he was a political He was a political activist, a political militant, right, who was in resistance to this government back in the 60s and the 70s. So these are the individuals who are most feared by this system and most and who often end up, in these types of units, the ones who they want to repress and not allow them to educate and organize amongst other prisoners of the general population. But the most of the people that are in these units are oftentimes people with mental illness. And just recently, this last week, there was a death at one of these units in the State Correctional Institution at Albion, and we've begun receiving reports from these units that the man was requesting help, that he'd been in solitary confinement for quite a long time, it's uncertain how long, that he was going through some type of emotional or psychological breakdown. And so what the prison authorities did is they got the guards all suited up in their SWAT team gear, essentially. They got an extraction team ready. They did not send a counselor. They did not send mental health staff. He barricaded himself in the door. It's unclear what exactly happened, but they pumped a bunch of pepper spray in there, and by the time they got in there and made it to this man and he came out of the cell, he was dead. This is not the first time this has happened. This actually happened at the end of April at SCI Rockview. A Pittsburgh native named John Carter, who was serving a sentence of life without parole for I think it was a burglary that went wrong when he was a teenager, right? If he would have lived 2 more months, the Supreme Court would have held his sentence unconstitutional, because in June they held life without parole sentences unconstitutional. He was killed by prison guards who pumped pepper spray into his cell when he was in a fight with staff over them continuing to deprive him of food. He spent his family estimates between 8 to 11 years of his life in solitary confinement. So I could talk for a lot longer about solitary, but I'm not at the moment. What I want to do is encourage people to sign the email list, to check out the back table. We have a 3-point platform we're asking people and organizations to sign on to. We've gotten more than 30 groups to sign on so far. The 3-point platform is really simple. It's that solitary confinement is torture, that it is a threat to public safety, and point number 3 is that it needs to be abolished. In addition to that, just some other things that people and institutions or organizations you're part of that you need to be doing to address the problems that we've been discussing and that the film articulated is that you need to support prisoners. First and foremost, you need to build relationships with people on the inside while they're inside, and that is the most effective way to learn what is going on. Prisoners are at the forefront of this struggle. They are years and decades ahead of lots of people that aren't incarcerated in terms of understanding the nature of the system and what needs to be done. As was referenced in the film, in December 2010, there was the largest work strike in U.S. prison history in the state of Georgia. More than 10,000 prisoners had a nonviolent strike. Media barely reported on it. These stories spread around the country, inside other prisons. There was a hunger strike in Ohio's death row amongst 5 prisoners. That helped inspire people in California who have been held in solitary confinement. Often more than 500 of them have been held for more than 10 years straight based on mere allegations that they are involved in prison gangs. Not because they violated any rules, but because the prison says, you're a gang member, and we have proof. Sometimes this proof includes writings by Mumia Abu-Jamal, engaging in lawsuits against the prison, cultural symbols, tattoos, etc. The prisoners in California somehow managed to, from their solitary confinement cells, organize a hunger strike that involved more than 6,000 people across more than a dozen institutions in July of 2011. Whenever the prison officials were too slow in granting any improvements in their conditions, they engaged in another strike in September and October, again lasting almost 3 weeks. This involved more than 12,000 people on the inside. So prisoners are at the forefront. We got to build relationships with prisoners. To that end, the Human Rights Coalition has weekly letter writing nights at 5129 Penn Avenue. Just see me afterwards if you want to be a part of that, 7 p.m. We got more mail than we know how to answer and can keep up with, so we always need the help. Other than that, research the issues, find alternative sources of information, join various groups, find ways to get involved online to action alerts around these issues, and more than anything, just organize wherever you're at. Organize with people and just be really engaged with these issues.